just
Okay.
like about it, and because I hike myself, and we see a lot of hikers in the clinic. So
Yep.
I just want to get my head around.
Awesome. That's great.
No
worries. All right. Well, so you can see that. All right. I might get started. Emily's here. Okay. All right. Now, heads up, guys. We've had heaps of really great questions. And I'm not going to be able to get to them all, otherwise I'll be here for a whole hour. I've only got half an hour. But if anyone has asked a question and they're on the call, just let me know and I'll be sure to answer that question, because I don't want to let anyone down if they've gone to the effort of joining live. But if you are watching the replay of this, then I'm going to do a full Q&A in December. So the first Wednesday in December will just be Q&A on the questions that we've got from this one, and also any new questions. And you can always ask your questions when you register for the event, or just email me and I'll be sure to get to them. So today we're going to talk about hydrocolloids. What are they? They're a category of wound dressing. Now, I've underlined wound. That becomes important a little bit later. But essentially, they need a wound base to be able to interact with, to work their magic. So they contain hydroactive or hydrophilic particles that absorb moisture from the wound on the underside of the dressing, and they're bound to a hydrophobic polymer that keeps the external environment out. They have two use cases, that is ulcer dressings and blister dressings. And we're going to have a look at both of these use cases. So let's make a start with the ulcer dressings. I think it's fair to say that the most common ones are Duoderm and Comfeel, at least from my perspective. Duoderm is very familiar, been using it for years, and also Comfeel. I used to have the Comfeel in my blister kits until I got my own brand. So I'm familiar with that one too. What types of wounds are they good for? Well, they're good for lightly exudating, non-infected lesions. So shallow ulcers, superficial abrasions, D-roof blisters, and minor burns was mentioned as well. So these are the types of wounds, lightly exudating. As podiatrists, what do we require of a hydrocolloid ulcer dressing? Well, we need it to be sterile. We need it to be individually packaged so that when we open one, we're not opening the whole lot. We also know that we need to anchor the edges with fixation tape. And we also know that ideally dressings stay on for as long as possible, like, maybe up to a week, but certainly with hydrocolloids more than 24 hours. So it's important to match the blistered, also the ulcer dressing, to the lesion, so that you're not having to change it too frequently. And of course, it needs to be registered with the relevant health authorities. What's not ideal about hydrocolloid ulcer dressings? Well, most of them are too big for the types of lesions that we want to put them on, or that we often see. The most common size is the 10 by 10. Now, if we get a lesion like this, which are these shallow ulcers, D-roof blisters, they're usually happening on these areas of the foot. And yet, if we open a 10 by 10, there's just far too much there. And a couple of things happen. Either we open it up, use it a little bit, and then fold it back down as best we can to keep it clean, but it's unsterile. We're probably using them on multiple patients, and there's a real cross-infection risk. The alternative is we use a little bit and throw the rest out, which seems a bit of a waste. Or another alternative is we just don't use them even when they're clinically indicated, because it's just not cost effective to do so. So I had a look on a few podiatry suppliers for some search terms to see what was available. These are just the podiatry suppliers that I know of. There may be some that I've missed. I'm sorry about that. Searching for Duoderm, there's mainly the 10 by 10. I didn't even know there was a 7.5 square that LGOs has. So yeah, big ones. Now, it's worth saying that Duoderm has this nice little one called a Duoderm spot. I think it's a Duoderm extra thin spot. None of the podiatry suppliers have this, but it's a great little size for like a small ulcer or D-roof blister, say under 1 or 2 met heads, or in the arch, or even at the back of the heel. I got mine from Independence Australia, if you want to look for those, and the fixation tape is just something that I cut out. So the Duoderm spot's a good one. I looked for Comfeel, and to my surprise, it just wasn't available at any of the podiatry suppliers that I know of, which is unexpected, because as I said, I used to put that in my blister kits. Hydroactive is a term that is often used synonymously with hydrocolloid. They're a bit different. The brands here are the Biotane and the Alleven. They're more like a foam dressing rather than a typical hydrocolloid dressing. They are, to my understanding, they're for wounds that are a bit more exudative, so they absorb a bit more exudate than hydrocolloids do. But they're getting into some smaller sizes, 5 by 6 centimetre. And hydrocolloid, we've got the 10 by 10s, the 7.5. Footmedics has a brand I wasn't aware of called Active Heal, 5 by 7.5. And Brigitte Medical has our BlisterPod range. So we're getting into these more Compeedy type sizes that are nice little sizes and shapes for these lesions that we are often presented with. So that's what we're going to be talking about, at least at the conclusion. I'm just going to introduce you to our new hydrocolloid range called BlisterPod Hydrocolloids. They're blister dressings, but they're hydrocolloids, so they can be used on all of those relevant types of lesions. And this is what they look like. So these are the relative sizes and like actual pictures of them in place. They're very similar to Compeed sizes and shapes, and that's what makes them so convenient. Now, when you think about what types of lesions that are more likely to de-roof in terms of blisters, it's the type of skin that is thinner and less tethered to underlying structures. So that is basically skin on the dorsum and the posterior heel, as opposed to plantar skin. So when they were doing experimental blister research, I think it was Salzburger back in the 1960s, they made comment about this, and they were producing these blisters on like the forearm or the shin or something, and they were noticing that it never actually got to the blister stage, as in it never became fluid filled, or it wasn't fluid filled for long, because we know it takes up to 2 hours for a blister to fully fill with fluid, but the roof was shearing off before that happened. And so our patients are often coming in with rubs or scrapes or abrasions where, you know, the initial injury was probably the intraepidermal tear of the blister, but they never actually saw the blister. So yeah, it's these smaller areas that we want to be able to put hydrocolloids on, because they're going to respond really well to these areas. But when we open up an ulcer dressing that's 10 by 10 centimetres, it just really seems a bit of a waste. And really the size and the shape matters, so that we can use them. They're convenient for us, and we can use them in a hygienic way. And they're just easy to apply. So that's ulcer dressings. Now we're going to have a look at the blister dressing scenario, which is what I'm more involved in. The three main brands, well, the main brand is Compeed by far. Band-Aid has their own brand called Advanced Healing, and we have our BlisterPod brand. What blisters should they be used on? Remember, I said they're a category of wound dressing, so they really should only be used on de-roofed blisters, so where there's a raw blister base that's weeping and it can interact with it. But the thing is, they're being used on every blister situation, from blister prevention to intact and torn blisters. And the problem there is, because they're very sticky, they're very adhesive to dry skin, when you go to, if you do have a blister there already, or you put one on as prevention and it doesn't work and you get a blister underneath it, when you go to remove that hydrocolloid, it's very common that the hydrocolloid will peel the whole blister roof off with it. This is a really common scenario in active situations, maybe not in relatively sedentary situations, but definitely in you know, long distance hiking and running. It's a big thing. However, if we have patients that are relatively sedentary, it's fair enough to expect Compeed to provide some prevention power if they're relatively inactive. And the way they can possibly work is they cushion, so they reduce pressure a little bit, and they spread shear load, which is what adhesive products like moleskin and tape do. It's common for podiatrists that are always taping for blister prevention. Just know that your active patients, some of them are getting blisters in spite of that, because spreading shear load doesn't negate shear load. It just spreads it over a bit of a larger area. It's easy to think that if we adhere something to the skin, it is going to be a 100% blister prevention, but that is using the mindset or the paradigm of blister causation being rubbing. But blisters aren't caused by rubbing on the skin surface. You can not have anything rubbing and it still get a blister, and that's why Compeed and tape, etc., aren't a reliable blister prevention. Hydrocolloid blister dressings are often used incorrectly, and that's very frequently leading to worsening blister situations, to the point where some races discourage them and even ban them. So in some ultra marathons, they have to have their kit checked and they have to have certain stuff in there, and they're not allowed to have certain stuff in there. And the reason that races don't want people having Compeed or hydrocolloids is because runners are just using them in the wrong situation. But part of that isn't the runner's fault. It's often the instructions for use on the packaging. They're just really less than ideal, and we're going to go through that in a moment. And it's very common that hydrocolloids, without fixation, they get that little bit of rollback, and when they stick to a sock, like they meld to the sock. It's just such a difficult situation to pick it out of the sock, and you know, when race medics are having to do that, they are just over it before it even starts. So that's partly what's going on there. Now, people are making other mistakes, so they don't realize that the anchoring is important because they're not told. The instructions for use don't make any mention of it, but it's very easy to get hydrocolloid rollback, very, very easy. This is an ultramarathon situation where this person made two mistakes. Number one, they put a Compeed on a hot spot, expecting it to prevent the blister. They got a blister anyway. But the second mistake they made was there was no fixation, and so they suffered a bit of rollback. It stuck to like glue to the sock. They peeled their sock off, and it peeled the whole blister roof off. Now, the difficult thing here is not only have we got a worsening blister situation, but this person now needs a hydrocolloid, but they now think that hydrocolloids are the root of all evil. And that's why hydrocolloids have a really bad rap, because of these poor instructions for use and these overinflated expectations about what they can do. Hydrocolloids, people will either love them or hate them, and this is the reason they hate them. People don't know that it's ideal to leave a dressing on for as long as possible, up to a week. So that expectation needs to be set in the instructions for use. They don't know what this white gel bubble is. Now, you and I know that this is expected. This is just a sign that the blister fluids are combining with the hydrocolloid particles, and this is a normal situation, but people jump to the conclusion that their blister's infected. I have lots of emails about this, and they're freaking out thinking that, you know, things have got worse and then they don't know what to do next. There's also anxiety at dressing changes because you take it off and it's gooey and it smells bad. Again, you and I know that this is a normal situation, but people are jumping to the conclusion that this hydrocolloid has caused their blister to become infected. So we need to set expectations there. And we also need to set expectations about what we can expect from a hydrocolloid. Exactly how does it work? Hydrocolloids are literally first aid. They're like betadine and a Band-Aid. So betadine and a Band-Aid, or betadine and a hydrocolloid, that's first aid for a blister. It's the bare minimum that needs to be done. But what it doesn't do is it doesn't reduce the blister causing forces well enough to guarantee that that blister is going to feel better when we put our shoe back on and keep walking or running, and also stop that blister from getting worse. So we've got to implement a really good prevention as well as the first aid, and that's what's classified as really meaningful blister treatment. And this becomes really important when you're doing race foot care support. The requirements that our patients should be looking for in a hydrocolloid, which they really don't have any idea about, is they don't realise that they should be sterile and individually wrapped because these are going on open wounds. But Compeed's provided like this in little nice little plastic containers. But if you take one of these out, put it in your handbag, one in your gym bag, one in your desk at work, one in the medicine cabinet at home, you'll soon realise that the edges pick up bits of grass and hair and goodness only knows what, and it's not the kind of thing you want to be putting on an open wound. They need to be individually wrapped so that they can remain sterile until the time comes to use it. And I've got a bit of a bee in my bonnet about instructions for use, because this is where most the other brands fall down. Mainly Compeed encourage the use of their product on any blister, including as a blister prevention. And that is literally responsible for why there's a lot of negative talk about hydrocolloids. Yeah. And worsening blister situations. And Band-Aid actively discourages the use of an antiseptic. And the reason they do that is their customers are complaining that it doesn't stay on for long enough. The idea, though, would not be to not put antiseptic on it. So they discourage the use of, I think it's ointments and lotions or something like that. But, you know, hydrocolloids are occlusive and they should be used on non-infected wounds. And I don't think there's many de-roof blisters that would de-roof in a clean environment. They're generally de-roofing in the shoe, which has been on for goodness only knows how long, and there will be colonisation there for sure. So it's really not a great idea to encourage people not to use antiseptic. The better idea would be to lock those edges in, anchor them with some fixation tape. That's going to prevent the rollback. It's going to prolong the length of time that that dressing will stay on, and the edges aren't going to lift, so it's going to keep the blister clean. So looking at the pros and cons at these three brands that we've looked at, Compeed is great in that, I mean, really the only thing it's got going for it is these convenient shapes and sizes, and that's a big plus for sure. Band-Aid goes a step further and they've got them sterile and individually wrapped, which is sensational. But our BlisterPod brand, because we put so much effort into this, because I'm always helping people troubleshoot their blister situations, I can see that we've needed really good instructions for use and the fixation tape, not just mentioning that we need it, but we're actually providing it with the product. So our brand new hydrocolloids come in 4 packs. They're all 6 packs, large, medium, small, and mixed. Mixed contains 2 of each. And I'm just going to show this video of, in case you're not familiar with these hydrocolloids, just the new packaging, what's in there, and what they look like to put on. So we've got the instructions for use on the back of the packet, but we've also got this extended blister treatment insert that is in 5 languages. We've got the 6 sterile and individually wrapped hydrocolloids, and we have the 6 fixation tapes. Now, if you guys have got any questions, just whack them in the chat box. And I just wanted to show you what it looks like to actually put them on, so you're kind of fully aware of what they're all about. There we go. Okay, in conclusion, podiatrists are using hydrocolloids, they're using a bit, keeping the rest in an unsterile way and risking cross-infection, or they're wasting unused product, or they're just not using hydrocolloids in the first place, even when they're clinically indicated, because it's just not cost-effective to do so. The general public is unwittingly using them for the wrong blister situations, thanks for some dubious instructions for use. They're using non-sterile hydrocolloids because that's the main brand provides them non-sterile. They're not using antiseptic because of some dubious, and they're certainly not told or provided with the stuff except for our new brand. They're anxious at dressing changes because they just don't know what to expect and what normal looks like, and they're not implementing further prevention because they had their expectations are that the hydrocolloid is all they need to do. It provides all the treatment and prevention necessary. But if we remember, they only provide a little bit of blister prevention power. They cushion a little bit. They spread shear load a little bit, but that's often not enough in an athletic situation. So our BlisterPod range of hydrocolloids are the only hydrocolloids in the convenient shapes and sizes of Compeed. They're sterile and individually packaged. They include the fixation tape. They have great instructions that really set our patients and our customers up for good blister outcomes, and they're registered with the TGA. So just a couple of photos to show you exactly what you get in each pack. That's the large size. So we've got the 6 sterile individually wrapped hydrocolloids, the 6 fixation tapes, the extended instructions for use. Same with the medium, the small 6-pack, and the mixed 6-pack. We've got 2 large, 2 medium, 2 small. They retail for between $9.95 and $16.95. You can get them from our website, blister-prevention.com. You can buy them retail there yourself, or at least if you feel like it's something that your patients would benefit from, you can point them in that direction. You can also get them at Brigitte Medical, and you can get them from us at wholesale rates. Now, if you're a wholesale partner of ours, then you already have access to these. I'm just going to put in the chat box, if you're not and you'd like to, you can apply by going to this link and filling out the application form, and we'll get you access to those wholesale rates. You can purchase them wholesale as individual 6-packs, and you can also purchase them as cartons. There's 10 6-packs in each carton. Now, the good thing about the carton is, let me just stop sharing. So the cartons look like that, and we've got a tearaway on there. So not only can you hang them in your retail section with the hang cell there, you can just undo tear away the carton tearaway area so that they can be displayed on your shelf, on your desk, on your whatever. Yeah, so that's it. Now, guys, is there any questions about hydrocolloids first of all? All good with that? Has anyone? Oh, Emily. Emily, you asked a question, and I want to get to that. If it's the Emily that asked the question. Did you ask a question about school shoes, Emily? Look, I've got 5 minutes, so I'll go through this one. But essentially, if you've just joined, what's going to happen is we're going to do the Q&A next month. That's going to be a full Q&A where we go through we got really great questions this month. So that's going to be the focus of next month's office hours, first Wednesday of the month. So Emily asked, what's the best blister prevention for kids with new school shoes, even when fitted correctly? Well, it depends where the blister is. The best blister prevention there's not a single answer for that question. So we need to really think about where the blister is. Now, from my experience, it's mainly at the back of the heel. So the best preventions that I find, easily the Ango patches are really the best that you can use. This is my most likely blister area, and I've tried everything, and the Ango patches are the most convenient and the longest lasting. However, with school kids in their school shoes, they have a history of, or a habit of, just, you know, forcing their heel into the shoe. Now, Ango patches, you can easily, until they're stuck really, really well, you can easily, as you force your heel down, catch the top of the patch, and bit by bit, more of that patch will be revealed. It'll collect sort of sock fluff, and after a while, it won't be very stuck on. So that's a bit of a downside for school kids. They need to take a bit of care with the patches at the back of the heel. You need to guide your heel over the patch, especially for the first few wears, so that you get a really, really good stick on the back of the heel of the shoe. Other than that, thick padded socks can help a lot. Lacing techniques to really keep that heel locked in. Tricky with school shoes, because school shoes typically don't have, you know, enough eyelets. I had a school shoe and it had 3 pairs of eyelets the other day, and this kid had relatively narrow heels, which didn't help the situation. But really, a firm lacing technique, even go to a bootmaker or the locksmith down here, can put a couple of new eyelets in the shoe just to really hold that heel down into the shoe. Calf stretches are an important thing to get started on. They're not going to have an immediate effect, but you know, blisters are generated first of all from bone movement relative to skin movement. So if the calf is tight, it's pulling on the posterior heel sooner, and there's more force lifting that heel bone up, and that leads to more blister causing shear. So get started with some calf stretches as well. And lastly, tape will help. Tape will help some people. Again, just expect, or don't be surprised if it doesn't help enough. Just move on to these other things. So I hope that, oh cool, Emily, I'm glad I did that. So time's up, guys. No questions about blisters in any way, you guys, at all? Nothing? All right. Well, feel free to join next month, because we got some really, really good questions. There's a specific blister location we're going to talk about. Joe wants to know about strategies for hikers. Someone wants to know about strategies for runners. And Ronnie wants to know about tape, and there was another one as well. So if there's nothing more there, I'll wrap things up. Any questions, give me a bell. Thanks for joining, and I will see you guys next month on the first Wednesday. Cheers. Thanks a lot.